I'm really looking forward to introducing my guest today. But firstly, let me just introduce myself a little bit. My name's Jenny Lynn, and I have a whole website in the service of training my colleagues called theopenmindtherapist.com. I'm a supervisor and a mentor and a transpersonal therapist. I'm a Buddhist of 35 years and actually a recovered schizophrenic as well. So this could be quite an interesting conversation as I develop this with Jerry as we go on to talk. I've interviewed many people before on a teleseminar basis. This is my first video interview, and each of them told me stuff that kind of validated my own experience and wanted me to, and encouraged me to share this with my therapist audience. So people like Rupert Sheldrake, Daniel Mackler and Peter Kinderman. These are all people in the field of therapy and psychotherapy and extended biology, as in Rupert Sheldrake, who push the barriers and boundaries of what we understand to be true so that we can open up the way for new ways of thinking and conceiving of the human condition. So, you know, my personal belief is that we're all perfectly capable of a mature, calm and grounded spirituality and psychology, but first we need to know where to look for the answers after years of having been sent in the wrong direction. So this is how I came across Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Brilliant. I met Jerry literally about 10 days ago. I was listening to your one of your YouTube interviews with Freeman Fly, the first one I heard. And I was really blown away to hear what you had to say about mental health, mental well-being, psychiatry, and in particular schizophrenia. As a recovered schizophrenic, obviously, I was very interested in what you had to say about it. So Jerry's a psychotherapist and veteran of some 40 years, having worked through all kinds of mental health institutions and prisons for most of your life. And your resume is so long and so complex. I thought the best thing for me to do would be to hand over to you and just give us a little bit of context about who you are and what you're going to, you know, where your thoughts have come from about what we're going to talk about.
Well,
what's your background?
Background. Okay.
Yeah.
Where I started off, after I got my master's degree, I landed a job at the largest psychiatric hospital in the world at the time, Central State Hospital, in Milledgeville, Georgia. And I believe there were somewhere around 10,000 patients there. It was a small city. I mean, it was it was a small city. They had 200 buildings there, and every kind of patient under the sun was there. And
mental health, is that mental health patients?
Yes.
Mental health.
For the most part, there were a lot who had kind of been dumped there that didn't have anywhere else to go. There were ones that families couldn't handle. There were the severely regressed ones. It was like the mental hospital for all of Georgia. Everybody went there. And everything under the sun was there. And for somebody who was fascinated with abnormal psychology, when I first got there, it was like a kid in a candy factory. You know, here were all these broken minds, and I was curious about why they were broken, and nobody knew. Yeah, so you wanted the entire bio. I don't want to go through there. So after working there for 7 years, I'd seen enough, and I was still in denial that the voices were separate entities. I thought even then, even though my denial system was in tatters, I kept patching it up.
Tell me, Jerry, about your denial system. When you said denial system was in tatters, what caused you to question that? Well,
when I found out, when I first got there, I started asking psychiatrists and psych nurses and attendants and everybody, you know, like, one of the things that continually happened was we could not keep schizophrenics on their medicines. And in order for, I was working in the Yarborough Center, which was a psychiatric rehab center. So at that point, all we seemed to have were those medications. That was the only thing that seemed to have an impact on the voices and the mental illness. And these patients, virtually all of them, would eventually stop taking those medications. And I didn't understand why, because then they would drift down into a dysfunctional psychotic episode, and they would stay there. And that wasn't pretty. I mean, what I saw when they went into those episodes where they were paranoid, they were hearing these awful voices telling them horrible things. They couldn't sleep, they couldn't eat. They started deteriorating. They were nervous. They were paranoid. They were out of touch with what we would call reality. It was a horrible experience. And I was going like, well, it appeared to me that they were voluntarily choosing to go nuts, to go crazy. I'm like, why would they do that? Why would they go off their meds? And, you know, I could understand new patients that were put on them, and then they face those side effects, and the side effects aren't good, and they go, you know, I don't want to take with these things. But then they would slip back into psychosis again, which was awful. And I'm like, okay, if we're going to rehabilitate these guys, if we're going to put them back out in society, and we would train them for jobs. You know, they would go into vocational school, and they'd learn auto mechanics and what else did they have? Cosmetology, janitorial services. So they had basic vocational schools. So it was my job to kind of try to figure out which ones had a good chance of making it and being released and working out there. And what I found was the schizophrenics would always go off their meds. And it's like, okay, if we don't find out why they're doing this, then we're wasting a lot of the state's money and a lot of our time. And, you know, I started asking them questions, and it appeared their voices were behind this. And I didn't know hardly anything about their voices. When I first got to the hospital, I believed, like everybody else, that these are hallucinations, you know, that they're unreal, that, you know, nobody knew anything about them. No, you know, none of the nurses know anything about them. Doctors didn't know about them. And all they told me was that they were hallucinations, that they weren't real. And then I started asking the patients about them. And I found out, and I had no lack of schizophrenic patients there. I mean, they were all over the place. I mean, I'd work in a couple of weeks. I'd work with more schizophrenics than most people talk to in a lifetime. So I started asking them questions. You know, what are they telling you? And it was nothing good. You know, they didn't.
What kind of
really,
things? What kind of things?
Oh, geez. I've got hundreds and hundreds of. I have a whole list of all the things they say. You know, you're no good. You're stupid. You're crazy. You're nobody likes you. I mean, virtually anything that was negative and upsetting, they would hit these people with. Very seldom was it anything positive. And if it was, I found out later, they would use that just to get the patient to believe what they're saying and then get them later. But it was consistently, unswervingly negative.
So what would they say about the drugs? Because my experience was, and this is what really, when I first saw you speak last 2 weeks ago, this really hit home for me. When you said what the voices were saying, it suddenly reminded me why I didn't take my drugs, or let's put it another way, why I didn't want to take them. Because, you know, I often used to say, I don't want to take these drugs. And they used to say to me, if you don't take them, we're going to inject you. And I used to think, I don't want to be injected, so I'll take the drugs. And they make you in this most humiliating way, stick your tongue out, show them the inside of your mouth so that they know you've swallowed the drugs.
You swallowed the drugs, yep.
Yeah? Yeah. And I just didn't want to take them. They made me feel sick. But the worst things were, and I'm going to preempt you a little bit now, is that I really felt they were trying to poison me. It really felt like I was being poisoned.
Exactly. Okay. And that's what the voices are telling these patients.
Right.
You know, so if you look at it, what I eventually ended up doing, trying to figure out what was going on, is I'd get the patient who had gone off his drugs and they'd put him back on again. And then I would question them. I'd bring them in, and I had to be careful here. And I'd give them a blank sheet of paper, and I'd say, okay, you write down all the side effects that you had from this drug. All right. Now, not all of them have the same side effects. You know, they experience them differently. So whatever side effects they had, write down on this sheet of paper, and, you know, here's half a page of side effects. Then I went to the DSM and everything that I could pull in, and I had a checklist of like 3 or 4 pages of psychotic symptoms. You know, hearing voices, not sleeping, not eating, visual hallucinations, everything in the DSM-3 is a check sheet. And there's some pretty awful stuff in there. You know, being attacked by voices, being, physically feeling these things. And I'd give them those 3 pages, and I'd say, put a check mark in the space between every one of these symptoms that you've felt, that you've experienced when you were off your meds. Right? So I'd give them that, and here's 3 pages of this awful stuff that they had experienced while they were in a psychotic state. You know, paranoia, feeling people were murdering them, voices talking behind their backs, voices attacking them, whispering in their ear, sexual attacks, all this horrible stuff. You know, 3 pages. And when they were finished, I'd hand them both to them, and I'd say, which is worst? You know, the meds or going psychotic? You know, didn't have one person say that the meds were worse than the voices. Right? Something was happening there, and what it reminded me of, and this was scores of them I did this to, and I could not figure out, you know, when put in that manner, and they could see it in front of their eyes, which is worst, they would say, well, yeah, the being psychotic is much worse. You know, but then they'd go back and they'd go off their meds again. You know, it wasn't rational. Why is this happening? You know, and then they would tell me, just like you did, I felt I was being poisoned. You know, and toward the end of the seventh year I was there, one female patient who was doing good in classes until she went off her meds, she was about to be kicked out of the program permanently, because it was like the second time she went off her meds, and we're thinking, okay, if she's not going to stay on her meds, then she's not going to be able to succeed. And when her mother found out that we were considering dropping her from the program, the mother said, no, don't do that. I can't handle her here. I'll come up there. I'll do what I can. I want to speak to both of you together. And I said, okay, that's fine. But she had to drive a long distance to get to the hospital. Mm-hmm. So we made an appointment for a Friday afternoon. She showed up, brought the young girl into the office. Her mother was there, and we're both sitting there talking to her, and I said, listen, you know, you do good in your classes, you're going to make it if you stay on your voices, on your medicines. Why do you keep going off? You know, why? You've done this before. You think you did it one time and you saw what happened. You did it a second time, you saw what happened. Why do you keep doing this? And she said, you're not going to believe me. You know. And I said, well, try me. I've heard a lot of strange things working here. And she said, the voices told me that I was being poisoned and not to take them. What they did is they pointed to those side effects and said, here's proof you are being poisoned by psychiatry. You know, they're giving you these pills, and the side effects are the effects of your being poisoned. And then
the thing is, Jerry, go on, carry on, you carry on.
Other things clicked into mind. So when I first got to the state hospital, I saw that psychiatrists were being attacked at a rate that was way higher than any other staff there. You know, and what I did is ended up looking it up. They are attacked at a rate higher than any other kind of physician. They're attacked at a rate higher than psych nurses. They're attacked at a rate higher than psychologists. They're attacked at a rate about equal to attendants who are working on those wards, who are around these patients 24 hours a day. The number of attacks on attendants was only slightly higher than it was on psychiatrists. You know, I'm going, okay, what are psychiatrists doing to pissing these patients off in 15 or 20 minutes a month they spend on with them? And it was like that clicked into place. You know, it was the medicines that the psychiatrists are dishing out